One of the best rides at Epic Universe, no, the entire Universal property, is undoubtedly Stardust Racers. This ride is leagues above any other coaster that Universal has created prior. And yes, dear viewer, I am including Velocicoaster. I believe full-heartedly that this ride is better than Velocicoaster. If we're strictly talking about the ride experience. The theming, on the other hand, not so much. But screw it, I can admire a great roller coaster. I may be slowly transitioning more and more to the theme park space, but I will always appreciate a good old-fashioned adrenaline machine. Now, Stardust Racers, this ride was a big deal for Universal. Not only because it's a flagship ride at their new park, but also because this ride was meant to be a spiritual successor to what came before. Who here remembers Dueling Dragons? You know, the dueling B&M invert that stopped racing after 10 years because some jerk brought a phone on the ride? Yeah, that Dueling Dragons. Oh, what a shame, that ride closed far too soon. Shut down in 2017 to make room for Hagrid's. Granted, the removal of this ride, it was devastating. However, I think it was a necessary sacrifice. Universal, they needed to take out Dueling Dragons. It was one of the best strategies that they implemented to expand Islands of Adventure. And you know what? If they didn't get rid of Dueling Dragons, then we wouldn't have Hagrid's, we wouldn't have Velocicoaster, and most importantly, we would not have Stardust Racers. And Stardust is a far superior dueling coaster, 100%. The whole gimmick with this roller coaster is the racing. When this ride is running at its full potential, you are side by side, racing, dueling, chasing the other train for nearly the entire ride cycle. That's the entire marketing push for this coaster. Unfortunately, I did not get to experience that. Yeah, I never got to duel Stardust Racers, and you know what? It stings. It really does. Season Pass member previews, what are you gonna do? But even though I didn't experience the racing aspect, I do believe that the ride experience itself is good enough for the ride to stand on its own two legs. The coaster, theoretically, it doesn't need to race. That's just a bonus. The ride holds its own. It is some of the best airtime you'll ever experience on a roller coaster, and dare I say, it is borderline painful sometimes. And that's a good thing, I love that painful ejector airtime. It's not Twisted Timbers or Steel Vengeance level of pain, but it's up there. And I'm grateful for this because when I was looking at the original testing footage, or some of the off-ride videos, or even watching the train Valley at one point, I was getting worried. I didn't think this coaster was gonna be that good. I thought, it'll be a decent ride, but it's so slow, sluggish, and it can barely clear some of these hills before it valleys. So my expectations were middle of the road. I couldn't fathom the possibility that Stardust could even hold a candle to a ride like Velocicoaster, but the airtime surprised me. Nearly every one of these hills gives you ejector, and the restraint doesn't suppress it. The Mack Ride restraints are very comfortable, very freeing for your upper body. However, it does staple you throughout the ride. Be warned of that. Make sure your affairs are in order before you get on this coaster, because you could feel a little squished if you're not sitting in the right position, if you know what I mean. If we focus on the ride experience itself, I only got on the yellow side of the coaster because, again, green wasn't working, but I don't think if I got on green, my opinion would drastically change. The only difference between each side is really displayed at the celestial roll, where the green side is going up into an inversion as it ascends the apex, and the yellow side is going down into an inversion as it exits the apex. Other than that, they're basically mirrored images of one another. So, the beginning of this coaster starts with a launch. And weirdly enough, the launch, it's good. I've only done a handful of Mack Ride's launch coasters, and every single time I've done one, I was always kind of underwhelmed. This? No, I'm not underwhelmed. I'm floored. The first launch begins with a small kick. You're gonna be propelled slightly, get a little pin to the back of your seat, and then stall out for a split second until you hit your second launch. Even though this is one launch tunnel, there's really two launches. Kind of like how on Pantheon, there's two launches separated by an airtime hill, but here instead of an airtime hill, it's straight track. So you get one launch and then the other. This is done primarily because of necessity, because that straight piece of track is meant to transfer the trains off into the storage shed, so they can't just have one long rolling launch. Would it have been better if they'd done that? Actually, no. I like this. The second launch makes the ride more unpredictable. You hit the first launch, you don't know what's going on, and then suddenly you're blasted off into the top hat. As you ascend the top hat, you get some great airtime, and then you drop down into an almost 90-degree drop, and enter an element that seems like a dive loop, but you don't invert. There's only one inversion on this ride, and this ain't it. But once you exit this element, the ride follows up by entering a series of back-to-back airtime hills. And once again, ejector all the way, except for this airtime hill. It feels more like a fake out before you get to this airtime hill, which goes into that iconic swooping turn where both trains are traveling in opposing directions. And I love this airtime hill. It kind of feels like that drop off the mid-course in Steel Vengeance, but better because you're supposed to interact with the other train, and there's a nice miss element to cool you down. After the turn, you hit your second launch, and this is more powerful than the first one. Actually, this launch is better than the second launch on Velocicoaster. Sure, the second launch on Velocicoaster, it is good, but I was never crazy about it. You never truly felt that high thrust from the acceleration like you do on some other launch coasters. And this is due to the fact they have too much speed going into this launch. When you enter, you're already going at around 35 miles per hour, so you're only gaining an additional 35 from the launch. Compared to Stardust, you're going relatively slower, maybe around 15 to 20 miles per hour, even though Stardust has a lower speed overall at 62 compared to Velocicoaster's 70. You're gaining a lot more speed from this launch compared to Velocicoaster. But after the launch, you arguably hit the highlight of the ride with the Celestial Roll. This is where you do your one and only inversion as you're flipping under and over the other track. And the yellow side's inversion, it is terrific. If they were only going to do one inversion with this ride, they better make it count. And they did. This kind of feels like a death roll, like on Iron Gwazi. Not as good as Iron Gwazi, but it's a worthy attempt. Is it as good as the Mosasaurus roll, though? No. That inversion will always be king. If Universal made this inversion more snappy, and you got pulled through it at a greater force, then I would probably have to rank this coaster even higher. Still, this inversion, it serves its purpose, and it does it to the best of its ability. What follows after the Celestial Roll is a bank turn along with a twisted airtime hill. It's not the best airtime hill on this coaster, but it's still memorable. And then you close off the ride with one more airtime hill that twists in and around the other track. Overall, this is an A+ coaster. I love that Universal, they're still building these kinds of rides. A coaster that specifically feels like it's being built for the enthusiast. They didn't want to be tame with this coaster. They went all out, and it paid off, and I adore it. I adore Stardust Racers. I just wish the ride had a better theme. Because Universal, they really cheaped out the theme for this ride. Is this ride ugly? No, not by a long shot. Is it bland? Kind of. There's not a whole lot to Stardust Racers. It's a stylized roller coaster. There's no theming, no story, it just looks nice. And normally, there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is this ride was built by Universal. They're known for their exceptional theming. Velocicoaster is the prime example of a high-thrill attraction with good theming. That ride, you have the Raptor paddock, you have the train weaving in and out between rockwork, while the launch tunnel is visible to the people in line. And they have a projection effect to have Raptors run after the train when it launches. Not to mention a Chris Pratt pre-show. Who doesn't love that? Who doesn't love Pratt? Stardust Racers, however, they don't have anything like this. The ride, it has a circular cattle pen with comets laid throughout the queue? I think they're supposed to be comets, but they don't look like comets. I thought they were supposed to be star domes. The projectors you use within a planetarium? No, apparently not. They're comets. Okay, and that's really all you see in the line. When you actually get to the station, the theming doesn't get much better. The entire first floor looks like the entrance to a Metra, and the second floor looks like a hangar bay. For some reason, it feels like Universal was just reusing a lot of bricks that they had left over from the Ministry of Magic and applied it to Stardust. It doesn't look bad, but it does feel off for the theme. A better way Universal could have improved the theming is if they made the circular queue look like something more akin to Guardians and had projection domes surrounding the guests with the narrator describing the constellations. Anything to keep the public entertained. Because from what I can tell, this ride has the potential to get some very long lines, and staring at these comets is not going to keep me entertained. I'm going to get bored pretty fast. Now, if we want to talk about theming they could have improved on during the ride experience, I'm not too sure on how much more they could have done, because high thrill attractions, they're inherently difficult to theme. On these kinds of rides, you're going pretty fast, so there's not a lot of time to take in the scenery or admire a set piece. That's why in Velocicoaster, you're going at a lower speed, throughout the paddock, and then you go at a higher speed through the second half of the ride, once you hit the more intense elements. Here, the entire ride's intense. There's no breathing room. The only thing they could have really added on to was maybe the second launch, perhaps by installing a star tunnel or something. Anything's better than what Stardust is doing now, which is just playing some music during the launch, and you can't even hear it unless you're off the ride. Other than improving this, I'm at a loss. The racing theme is just too bare bone. But sometimes I guess the simple solution is the best one. All Universal did for this ride was light up the trains and said, "Those are the comets, you're riding a comet, that's it, done and done." And I guess that's enough. Despite Stardust Racers having a minimal theme, it is a fantastic night ride. I was a little skeptical when Universal said that they weren't going to light up the track at all and just rely on the light from the trains. And apparently they were right. The train light is all they need. When you're riding the coaster, it's pitch black out there, and from the ground, all you could see is the trains acting like shooting stars. The only thing that would make a night ride on Stardust Racers better is if the onboard audio was louder. Seriously, Universal, can you turn up the volume on Stardust Racers? I appreciate the addition of onboard audio, but that means nothing if I can't hear it. Turn up the volume to the same level as the Hulk. Please, I want to feel the adrenaline. When I was at Epic, I got on Stardust 4 times, and I was thoroughly pleased with each and every ride. This is the best roller coaster Universal has ever built, and I can only imagine that it's going to get even better once I finally get a dueling ride on it. That is going to be sweet. I can't wait. So Universal, keep up the good work. Build more coasters like Stardust. Just don't cheapen out on the theme. Make your next major roller coaster the full package.